Welcome in to another episode of my Dynasty Fantasy Football YouTube. Today, I've got my 5 takeaway series. As always, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Let's go. So we've got a jam-packed episode today, but one of the first things I wanted to talk about was how I'm not a big fan of Deebo Samuel, feeling that he's washed up. So, of course, this is in the news because the 49ers traded Deebo Samuel over the weekend to the Commanders in exchange for a fifth-round pick, an early fifth that was originally from the Saints in this year's draft. So, the 49ers will eat a $31 million dead cap hit this year, will tighten their cap this year, but they will have more cap space overall. And that's what matters because Brock Purdy's last really cheap year of his rookie deal is this year. Big money is going to kick in for 2026 and beyond. So this deal makes sense to clean out their 2026 cap. Now, the 49ers have 11 total picks in the 2025 NFL draft. So they're going to be able to add some depth options to fill out the roster with cheaper players. We'll go more into that maybe at a later time. But I want to focus now on the Commanders. So the Commanders, they have 2 high-priced wide receivers, both in the final year of their contract. Samuel will count $17.5 million against their 2025 salary cap. They just inherited the salary of his contract, none of the other dead cap parts, but just that $17.5 million. Terry McLaurin counts for $25.5 million, but his salary is actually lower than Deebo's. My guess is we see a McLaurin extension to make him higher paid than Deebo and to reduce that $25.5 million cap number. But those are going to be 2 receivers they have. Terry McLaurin, wide receiver 1, Deebo Samuel, wide receiver 2 for now, because I do not think the Commanders are done adding wide receivers. And why don't I think that? Well, in 15 games, Deebo had 51 catches, 670 yards, 3 touchdowns, 81 targets, 3.4 catches and 44.7 yards a game, and 42 carries for 136 yards and touchdown. He was in decline at 28 years old. At best, he was the third option behind Juwan Jennings and George Kittle. They were clearly ahead of him. Brandon Ayuk, when he was playing, was equal or even better at times, and Brandon Ayuk wasn't that good. Ricky Pearsall at the end of the season overtook him. So there were times where Deebo was the 4th option, not to mention when Christian McCaffrey was healthy. I don't think that Deebo Samuel is going to just be the second option here again. I think he's going to be more of the third option. So how do I think that's going to happen? Well, the Commanders have $64 million in cap space. They don't have much on the roster. A lot of free agents. All of their, middling wide receivers are all free agents. They could easily still sign Devontae Adams. They could still sign Amari Cooper. They have the cap space. They could draft a wide receiver with their first or second round pick, but they have an elite quarterback, Jaden Daniels, or near elite on a rookie deal. They have room to add around him. They're going to do more than just bring back Zach Ertz and some of Noah Brown, De'Ami Brown, and Olamide Zaccheaus. Those 4 are all free agents. They'll probably bring back Zach Ertz. They might bring back one of those players I listed, but that's not all they're going to do. They're going to add someone more significant, and that wide receiver, who if it's Noah Brown, De'Ami Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus, whoever it is, will probably be their wide receiver 4, and they'll add another outside wide receiver to be the 2. Now, what would I do? I'd sell Deebo Samuel. I mean, he just turned 29. He looked not good. Typically, players like that don't magically become better. He was in a great scheme previously. I saw a couple of deals. Sell him for the 205 in a 10-team superflex. That's a 203 and a 12-team. I'd easily take that. No questions. And then this crazy one, Deebo Samuel plus Cooper Kupp for 26 first. I would take the 26 first without even thinking about it. I'd look to move on from Deebo Samuel because if they add a wide receiver in the first round, the value of Deebo Samuel will significantly drop. So my next takeaway, the NFL Combine happened this weekend. And, some players did well. Some players did badly. But I will say I don't move my dynasty ranks based on the Combine directly. The most important takeaway from the NFL Combine is how it affects draft capital. If NFL teams care, then I care. If they don't, then I don't, right? Like, if they drop Shadur Sanders out of the top 15 because he didn't work out, then I care. If he's still a top 5 pick, then I couldn't care less. So that's for 95% of the Combine. That's how I feel. I don't count it twice. I do not count Combine metrics in my Dynasty rookie ranks as a separate piece. The only part of why I count it is how it affects draft capital. There's one exception, which I will get into. Athleticism for tight ends is the only really actionable measure at the NFL Combine outside of how it affects draft capital. Pretty much every other metric, like I said, factored into draft capital. We don't need to double count it outside of counting it on how it affects projected draft capital. The one thing, though, athleticism for tight ends, why is that? It's because tight ends are the only fantasy position where they're drafted for significant things outside of their fantasy contribution. Most of what a quarterback is drafted for, all of it, I mean, is for how they pass the ball, sometimes how they run. It all shows up fantasy points. Running backs, mostly what they're drafted for, 90% is how they run the ball. And then, how they catch passes. Shows up in fantasy points. Wide receivers, drafted for how they run routes, how they catch the ball. Shows up in fantasy points. 90% of the position. Tight end, not so much. A lot of tight ends are drafted for their role as a run blocker just as much as they are for their passing skills. So we have to look at the combine metrics because we can't just use draft capital to tell us which tight ends will be relevant. A tight end who is not athletic essentially will never be fantasy relevant. There's like 2 exceptions, and even they were not all that great. I mean, Kyle Rudolph is one of them, and he was not great, right? So you have to be athletic as a tight end to succeed for fantasy. Period. End of story. No exceptions. So that's something to consider when you look at the combine numbers. Most of my rookie discussion is taking place in the Patreon. It's been very active. I do stuff on there year round. Rookie content will proceed on the YouTube post-draft in earnest. So this was breaking news as I started recording. T. Higgins officially received the franchise tag from the Bengals, and the drama continues. With the rising salary cap, the franchise tag number seemed reasonable, even on a second tag. Higgins is going to get 0.18 million on a 1-year deal. So honestly, compared to top wide receivers, I understand why the Bengals did it. It was better than letting him walk for nothing, but things are going to get kind of tricky now. So it's important to note, this is Higgins' second franchise tag. There's no such thing as a third franchise tag for any position other than quarterback. Why is that? Because the third franchise tag either costs 144% of the previous salary or the average of the top 5 salaries at the highest paid position in the league, always quarterbacks. That's why you hear people say third franchise tag means quarterback money. A wide receiver will never, ever receive a third franchise tag. That will not happen. So that's why we haven't been discussing Chris Godwin being tagged. He's already been tagged twice, so he will not be tagged a third time. T. Higgins will now not be tagged a third time. So there are now 3 choices. A tag and trade, which we did see with Jarvis Landry like 5-6 years ago. A contract extension by July 15th. That is the deadline. Or Higgins hits free agency in 2026. A tag and trade would involve a team trading picks to the Bengals and also signing Higgins to a long-term deal. You're not going to trade for Higgins unless you already have a contract worked out. It would require negotiations to break down between Higgins and the Bengals, and would also likely occur before or during the 2025 NFL draft, so the Bengals can acquire more picks to add a replacement wide receiver for Higgins. Now, a contract extension must be done by the NFL CBA by July 15th, or it cannot happen. Again, I do think the contract extension happens sooner rather than later if it does happen. If we pass the NFL draft and nothing happens, I think we're heading for choice C. Higgins hitting free agency in 2026, which seems kind of silly for all parties. Why wouldn't you trade him if you're planning on letting him walk? But regardless, that may be what the Bengals are going to do. I don't know. Now, there's not really like an actionable move to do here. There's not a specific trade and not a specific dynasty trade I'm looking to do, right? But you just got to get ready for this drama. Let's say that it doesn't play out quickly. We move on, it takes some time. You're going to hear people say, T. Higgins will hold out without a new deal, something like that. That's not going to happen. It's not. By July 15th, we're going to know. He's either going to be traded, he'll have signed an extension, or not. If not, then he's going to show up. He's going to play because he literally has no choice. Otherwise, we've seen with like Hassan Reddick, it's career ending if you don't do that. So he's going to show up. He's going to play. You can do a slightly adjusted 1-year deal. They can give him a few extra million, not extend the contract, but give him a few extra million to encourage him to show up. The Raiders did that with Josh Jacobs. The Giants did that with Saquon Barkley. You can do incentives. You can do stuff like that. But he'll show up because he has no choice. So I'm just preparing you. Get ready for this to consume the news cycle for more time. Now, if you like my YouTube content, you should sign up for the Patreon. Right now, I'm offering a 50% discount at all tiers using the code TylerYT. Type that code in at checkout and you'll get a 50% discount off your first month at whatever tier you join. You can get my rankings, including newly posted rookie ranks, access to the Discord, which is where I interact with the patrons. All of my write-ups, I did quarterbacks and tight ends from the NFL Combine. I'm going to do wide receivers and running backs later this week. Direct message fantasy advice is also available. And, of course, the ability to ask in advance questions for the YouTube videos, which you'll see at the end of this video. Tiers begin at just $5 a month, $250 with the discount, and include a sliding scale of benefits. If you want to know more about the Patreon, check out my why you should join the Patreon videos on the channel. I think I'm going to be doing another one on Wednesday. So if you watch that video, you'll learn more about what I'm offering. With that said, let's move into my next takeaway. So next up, Matthew Stafford will continue to provide fantasy gold for the Rams wide receiver. So I did talk about Stafford on the takeaways video. He's on the cover 2 weeks ago. So I'm not going to rehash his stats and fantasy outlook, but I do kind of want to talk about it a little bit. So the Rams retained Stafford for 2025 in an updated contract. Now, very important to note, not an extension. No new years were added. The details are still a little fuzzy. It's going to come out. It always does. But right now, we don't have the details. The contract still expires after 2026. What I'm kind of gathering from the article I read was that he got a huge raise for this year. He got better guarantees for this year. Probably still lacking in the salary or guarantees he wants for 2026. So what does that mean? You could be right back here again in 2026. So it has not locked Stafford in for the rest of his career. It's not a career-ending extension to end his career on the Rams. It's a one-year Band-Aid again, and then we're going to see what happens after that. Now, what do I think this means? You already saw the Rams extended Alaric Jackson. I think I'm pronouncing it correctly. One of their linemen. So what they're doing is they're going all in. They're going all in for this year. They have many great players on rookie deals. I mean, Puka Nacua, a great deal. They also have Braden Fisk, another defensive player on a great deal. There are other players. They have really young nucleus of players. So even with the Stafford contract, that means they have room to add players to go all in. Their window is now. Sean McVay said that the team will explore all avenues to add wide receivers. That's what he said. He said to replace Cooper Kupp. So he said he'd be interested in exploring free agency, the NFL draft, and trades. What he did not say is that players on the team could step up into bigger roles. Oh, that's interesting. He didn't seem to like that idea. So what that means is the Rams are going to make a big splash at wide receiver. I still think Davante Adams would make a lot of sense here. It was talked about when we were talking about Aaron Rodgers being the Rams quarterback. But I still think Davante Adams would make sense. The Rams have money to pay him. This is a team that was the closest to beating the Eagles. Davante Adams wants to win a title. Matthew Stafford is a great throwing quarterback who throws the ball a lot. Yeah, I mean, I like everything about this destination for Davante Adams. It would still be my prediction for Davante Adams. If I could only pick one team, it would be the Rams. So prepare for something like that. Again, I don't know what you really do. I'm not worried about Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua is elite or near it. So I'm just saying I would prepare for this. Now, my last takeaway, DK Metcalf rumors continue. Metcalf had kind of a meh 2024 season. He was fine. 15 games, 66 catches, 992 yards, 5 touchdowns, 108 targets, 4.4 catches, and 66.1 yards a game. The missed games, he missed 2 games, had that injury, and JSN smash breakout, I think made people think that DK was worse than he was. He was very similar to 2023. Slightly more catches, slightly less yardage, very similar target volume. Bit unlucky on touchdowns. Metcalf is rumored in both trade and extension talks because of JSN's emergence. So where are we with DK Metcalf? He enters the final year of his contract in 2025. Cap hit of $31.875 million. He's got an $18 million salary, so he's only getting $18 million this year, which is low for a wide receiver, but a higher cap hit because there's been a bunch of restructures. The Seahawks could extend him for a couple of years to bring down that cap hit and give him more money, but they have to find middle ground on a deal. Luckily, JSN's rookie deal goes through 2026, very valuable, with a fifth-year option in 2027. So they can afford to give Metcalf a raise this year and a pretty big salary in 2026, maybe even 2027, because the fifth-year option for wide receivers is not market rate. They're also probably going to extend Geno Smith to clear some cap room for this year. But if they cannot reach a deal with Metcalf, the trade market is picking up. There's no universe in which the Seahawks cut DK Metcalf. They're either letting him play out the contract, that's the least likely, or I think they either extend or trade DK Metcalf. If there's a trade, again, I think extension is more likely. But if a trade does occur, the Packers are the most mentioned team by far. I do think Metcalf, I usually say we don't want wide receivers to change teams. I do think DK Metcalf is a wide receiver who could benefit from a change of scenery. I don't think he's going to overtake JSN in target volume. That's not going to happen. I think if he stays on the Seahawks, he'll be the 1B at best. I think it's a question of, is it a 1A, 1B, or is it a 1-2? But Metcalf's still a very talented wide receiver. He's only 27 years old. I think he could be a team's wide receiver 1, like the Packers. If Metcalf went to the Packers, he would be by far the best wide receiver on that team. So for me, I'd be exploring the DK Metcalf market. I'm more into buying Metcalf than selling. Still a good player. I did see this trade, which I thought was funny. Buy DK Metcalf for 208 and Dontavian Wicks. Almost looks like a real life trade that the Packers might want to do. In 12-team Superflex, there's not going to be anything comparable to Metcalf at the 208. It's an idea. If you can get Metcalf at a discount like this, I would absolutely do it. If he's still expensive, maybe I'd target someone else. But I would explore the DK Metcalf trade market in your league. Well, now we've got a couple of Patreon questions, so we'll go into those. So first one, where do you see the tight ends in this class being drafted, their future value? So Tyler Warren, Colston, Loveland, they'll go in the first round. I think both will instantly be top 6 to 7 Dynasty tight ends because there's no alternatives, really. The top of Dynasty tight end is very weak. As for the rest, I'm not really a fan. There might be a tight end in the second, like Elijah Arroyo or Mason Taylor. Harold Fannin kind of fell out of that possibility, I think. But I'm not really chasing tight end in this rookie class compared to other positions. In the second and third round, I'll be looking at running backs mostly, not tight ends. Which rookies that had amazing seasons do you expect to have fall-offs? CJ Stroud or similar type experiences? So that doesn't always happen. I mean, usually when a player is really, really good as a rookie, they are really, really good. It's hard to be really, really good as a rookie. So typically I'm looking at like the top rookie guys. I mean, Brock Bowers, Malik Neighbors, Jaden Daniels. Typically, I'm kind of believing in all of those guys. Ones where I have some more skepticism, Bo Nix. I still have some skepticism from his prospect profile. But when it comes to like real skepticism, you have to go lower down. I mean, you know, Tyrone Tracy is a rookie who did well, but I don't buy into long-term at all. But no, I mean, it's hard to predict a CJ Stroud type fall off. So I'm not like predicting that for Jaden Daniels or anything like that. Which offseason news has been going under the radar that you think could impact fantasy for 2025? So for me, I think what hasn't been discussed enough is Mark Andrews. I do think that Mark Andrews is a candidate to be released or traded in the coming days, leaving Isaiah Likely as the new starter. I just haven't heard it discussed as much as other situations. We're going to have to see, but I do think that's one that's a little bit under the radar just because it's, you know, I think tight end is not as sexy. So I think it doesn't get discussed as much, but we're going to see. I can almost promise you that if that does happen, Isaiah Likely will be a huge sell for me. I'm not just assuming that Isaiah Likely is going to be a top 5 tight end with Mark Andrews gone. I haven't seen that from Isaiah Likely. So we'll see. But yeah, that would be the one I would choose. Now, if you like the video, make sure to support the channel by subscribing. That's the most important thing you can do to support the YouTube channel. And don't forget to hit that notifications bell so you can be notified about all my exciting content as it drops on here. Of course, if you want my best fantasy football advice, including year-round rookie coverage, it's available on the Patreon. Dynasty and rookie content year-round. And of course, we cover redraft and start sit during those periods. You get 50% discount at all tiers using code TylerYT. You can sign up in the top right corner, patreon.com/fantasy advice. Every sign up helps support my independent content. But once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all later.